Before you swipe away, imagine a dull gray steel penny or an old brown wheat penny sitting in a jar worth more than a brand new car, more than a house down payment, more than years of savings. This is not hype, this is real American history, hidden in plain sight, and millions of people have already spent these coins without ever knowing what they had. Today, you are about to discover the top 5 most valuable U.S. steel penny and wheat penny coins ever found. Coins born from war shortages, minting mistakes, and historic firsts. Coins so rare that collectors chase them for a lifetime. Watch closely, because number 1 is legendary. Imagine holding a coin that was never meant to exist, a coin born from global war, metal shortages, and one of the most desperate moments in American history. A coin that feels wrong in the hand, looks wrong to the eye, and sounds wrong when dropped. A coin that sparks arguments among collectors, confuses beginners, and still turns up in pocket change stories decades later. This is the 1943 steel 1 cent a penny that broke every rule of American coinage, and in doing so became one of the most talked about coins ever produced in the United States. And if you think this is just another old penny, think again, because this coin carries the weight of World War II factories running day and night, young men leaving home for distant battlefields, women stepping into industrial jobs for the first time, and a government scrambling to save every ounce of copper for bullets, shell casings, and electrical wiring. This single cent piece tells the story of a nation at war, a nation adapting, and a nation willing to change even its smallest everyday objects to survive. The year is 1943. The United States is fully committed to World War II. Copper is no longer just a metal. It is a strategic weapon needed for ammunition, communications, vehicles, and naval equipment. The Lincoln cent, which since 1909 had been struck in a bronze alloy made mostly of copper, suddenly became a problem. Millions upon millions of pennies were produced every year, and every one of them used copper. The Treasury Department knew something had to change. Experiments were conducted with glass, plastic, rubber, aluminum, zinc, and even fiber, but none of these materials worked well enough for mass circulation. Vending machines rejected them. They wore out too fast, or they were too expensive. Finally, the decision was made to strike the penny on a steel placket coated with zinc, a radical move that had never been done before in American circulating coinage. And almost overnight, the familiar warm brown penny was replaced with a cold silver gray coin that looked more like a dime than a cent. When these steel pennies entered circulation in 1943, the public reaction was immediate and intense. People complained that the coins were easily confused with nickels and dimes, leading to accidental overpayments. Others disliked the way they felt light, hollow, and strangely smooth. Many reported that the coins rusted quickly once the thin zinc coating wore off, revealing the steel beneath, which would corrode and stain pockets and purses. The coins stuck to magnets, which fascinated children and annoyed adults, and cash registers began to fill with rust flakes. Yet despite all of these issues, the mint pushed forward because the war effort mattered more than convenience, and during that single year, more than 1 billion steel cents were struck across 3 mints: Philadelphia, Denver, and San Francisco, making the 1943 steel cent one of the most produced one-year types in American history. Yet quantity alone does not define importance, because hidden within this flood of steel pennies are stories of human error, mystery, and legendary rarity during the production process. A small number of bronze plankets left over from 1942 were accidentally fed into the presses and struck with 1943 dies, creating the famous 1943 bronze cent, one of the most valuable coins in the world, worth hundreds of thousands and in some cases millions of dollars. These accidental survivors flipped the collecting world upside down and created a treasure hunt that continues to this day. People still check every 1943 penny, hoping against all odds that theirs is bronze and not steel. And that hope alone has kept the legend alive for generations. But the steel cent has its own errors and varieties, including double dies, off-center strikes, and reprocessed coins that were plated after the fact to imitate rarity, adding another layer of intrigue and caution to the story. Beyond the errors, the steel cent represents A turning point in American coinage philosophy proved that the mint could rapidly change composition under pressure and that circulating coinage was not immune to global events in 1944. The mint returned to a copper-based alloy, but even then, it was not the same bronze as before. Instead, recycled shell casings from the battlefield were melted down and turned into pennies, bringing the war full circle. From ammunition back into everyday commerce, making the 1943 steel cent the centerpiece of a 3-year transformation that mirrored the chaos and ingenuity of the era. Collectors today often overlook the steel cent because of its high mintage, but that is a mistake. Because condition is everything, most steel cents were heavily circulated, rusted, cleaned, or replated, making high-grade original examples surprisingly scarce. Finding one with full original zinc coating, sharp details, and no corrosion is far more difficult than the raw numbers suggest, and certified examples in top grades command strong premiums, proving that history and preservation always outweigh quantity. The design itself remains the familiar Lincoln portrait created by Victor David Brenner, but on steel the details appear sharper, harsher, almost industrial. Wheat ears on the reverse stand tall, framing the words 1 cent and United States of America like an emblem of endurance and productivity, fitting symbols for a nation mobilized for total war. This coin was in the hands of factory workers, soldiers, families, children buying candy and newspapers, and every transaction carried a silent reminder that the country was at war and sacrifice was everywhere, even in your pocket. Today, the 1943 steel penny remains one of the most educational coins ever made. It teaches about economics, material science, government decision-making, and human behavior, all through a single cent. It invites beginners into the hobby because it looks different, feels different, and sparks curiosity, and it keeps advanced collectors engaged through its varieties, condition, challenges, and famous accidental counterparts. It is a coin that refuses to be ignored because it is not just money, it is a historical artifact from a moment when the world was on fire and even the smallest object had to serve a greater purpose. And as you hold a 1943 steel cent, you are not just holding steel and zinc, you are holding the sound of wartime factories, the urgency of rationing, the fear and hope of a nation united, and the proof that history sometimes shows up in the most unexpected places, right in the palm of your hand. And that is why this penny matters, and why its story deserves to be told in full depth. Without shortcuts, without hype, just the raw, powerful truth of a 1 cent coin that carried the weight of a world at war. Close your eyes for a moment and imagine holding a small brown copper coin that has passed through the hands of factory workers, farmers, soldiers, shopkeepers, and children more than 70 years ago. A coin that looks simple at first glance, yet quietly carries the weight of an entire nation rebuilding itself after the most destructive war in human history. This is the 1951 wheat penny, 1 cent, a coin born in a world balancing hope, fear, progress, and uncertainty. And today we are going to dive deep into its complete story, from the history of its design to the political and economic forces shaping its creation to the minting process, the varieties, the errors, the metal composition, the survival rates, the collecting market, and why this single year stands as one of the most fascinating chapters in the entire wheat cent series. This is not just a penny. This is a time capsule from the heart of post-war America's story of the 1951 wheat penny begins long before the coin itself was struck, reaching back to the early 20th century when the United States decided for the first time to place a real historical figure on everyday circulating coinage in 1909 to honor the centennial of Abraham Lincoln's birth. Sculptor Victor David Brenner created a portrait that would become one of the most recognized images in American history. Lincoln's calm, steady gaze symbolized unity, strength, and moral leadership, qualities desperately needed during times of national challenge. And by 1951, that symbolism was more relevant than ever. The world was emerging from World War II. America was now a global superpower. The Cold War was intensifying, and the Korean War had erupted just 1 year earlier in 1950, making 1951 a year filled with tension, patriotism, and industrial momentum. When the 1951 wheat penny was struck, the United States Mint was operating at full capacity. The demand for coinage was massive. As Americans returned to civilian life, businesses expanded, suburbs grew, and consumer spending surged. Pennies were essential for everyday commerce. Newspapers, candy, public transportation, and gas stations relied heavily on 1-cent coins. And the wheat penny was still the workhorse of American change. In 1951, production took place at 3 mints: Philadelphia, Denver, and San Francisco, each leaving its own mark on the coins and its own legacy for collectors. Philadelphia struck hundreds of millions of pennies without a mint mark. Denver added a small D beneath the date, and San Francisco placed an S. Each mint faced different working conditions, different dieware, and different quality control standards, all of which contribute to the unique character of surviving coins today. The metal composition of the 1951 wheat penny tells its own story. During World War II, copper was diverted for military use, leading to the famous steel cents of 1943 and the shellac-coated steel experiment that left a lasting impression on collectors. By 1951, the penny had returned to its traditional bronze alloy, consisting primarily of copper with small amounts of tin and zinc. These cents have a warm reddish-brown tone when well preserved, and over time, exposure to air, moisture, and handling transformed many into deeper brown hues. Collectors today categorize them as red, red-brown, or brown, with original red examples being significantly rarer and more valuable, especially in higher mint state. Greatest design of the wheat penny remained unchanged in 1951, with Lincoln's bust on the obverse and stylized wheat ears framing the words 1 cent and United States of America on the reverse. The wheat stalks symbolized abundance, agriculture, and national prosperity, a fitting message for a country focused on growth and stability after years of rationing and sacrifice. Above the wheat ears, the motto E pluribus unum reinforced the idea of unity, for many a powerful concept during the early Cold War, when ideological divisions threatened global peace. What truly elevates the 1951 wheat penny from common pocket change to historical artifact is the sheer scale of its production, combined with the stories hidden in its details. Hundreds of millions were minted, yet most were heavily circulated, worn down, lost, melted, or forgotten. Finding a sharply struck example today with full wheat lines, crisp lettering, and minimal contact marks is far more challenging than raw mintage numbers suggest. And this is where collectors begin to appreciate the nuance of the coiners and varieties. Add another layer of intrigue to the 1951 wheat penny. Die cracks, die breaks, repunched mint marks, off-center strikes, double dies, and placket flaws can all be found, though major double dies are scarce. Minor doubling and machine doubling are often mistaken for rare varieties, making careful examination essential. Some Denver mint coins show repunched demint marks where the punch was applied more than once, creating a shadow effect under magnification, while San Francisco issues sometimes display weaker strikes due to worn dies, giving Lincoln's hair and the wheat lines a softer appearance. Grading plays a critical role in the value and desirability of the 1951 wheat penny. Circulated examples are plentiful and affordable, serving as entry points for new collectors, but uncirculated pieces, especially those certified by professional grading services, can command significant premiums, particularly in red condition, where original mint luster survives untouched by decades of handling. A blazing red 1951 penny with sharp strike and clean surfaces is a true survivor, a coin that somehow avoided the pockets, purses, and cash registers of a growing nation. Beyond the technical aspects, the 1951 wheat penny connects directly to everyday American life of the early 1950s. This was the era of black and white television, roadside diners, jukeboxes, and the dawn of rock and roll. Families drove new cars filled with optimism while worrying about nuclear drills and international conflict. Children collected pennies in jars. Newspapers cost a few cents, and a single wheat penny could still buy small treats, making these coins deeply woven into the fabric of daily experience for collectors today. The 1951 wheat Penny represents both accessibility and depth. It is common enough to be found in old collections and rolls, yet complex enough to reward serious study. It invites beginners with its affordability and challenges advanced numismatists with condition, rarity, and subtle varieties. It serves as a bridge between history, economics, art, and metallurgy, and it stands near the end of the wheat cent era, which would conclude in 1958. Making it part of the final chapter of a beloved design. As you hold, or imagine holding a 1951 wheat penny. You are not just looking at a piece of copper, you are touching a moment in time when America stood at the crossroads of tradition and modernity, when Lincoln's image continued to guide the nation through uncertainty, and when even the smallest coin carried the weight of national identity. This is why the 1951 wheat penny matters. This is why collectors still search for it, study it, and treasure it. And this is why this humble 1-cent coin deserves an entire deep dive, a full story, and a long, careful look, because sometimes the smallest objects tell the biggest stories. Imagine holding a single ordinary copper coin in your hand and realizing that it once shook the entire world of American coin collecting, that this tiny 1-cent piece passed through millions of pockets, gas stations, lunch counters, and pay envelopes, yet hid a dramatic secret that would turn a forgotten year into a legend. This is the story of the 1955 Lincoln wheat penny, a coin born in the heart of post-war America, time when the nation was booming, factories were roaring, families were moving to the suburbs, and money moved fast through a growing economy. Yet inside that rush, one small mistake slipped through the most powerful minting system in the world and became one of the most famous errors ever struck. This is not just a coin story. It is a story of human hands, mechanical limits, government decisions, and chance colliding at exactly the right moment to create history. The 1955 wheat penny belongs to the final chapter of the wheat cent era, which began in 1909 to honor Abraham Lincoln on the 100th anniversary of his birth, when sculptor Victor David Brenner placed Lincoln's profile on the obverse and his simple wheat ears on the reverse, symbolizing prosperity and unity. The design became the backbone of everyday American commerce for nearly 50 years. By 1955, the wheat cent was a familiar object, almost invisible to the public, yet the United States Mint was under enormous pressure that year. America's economy was expanding, coin demand was exploding, and the Philadelphia Mint was producing cents at a relentless pace, working long hours with worn dies and intense production schedules. Quality control was focused on quantity, because the nation needed coins immediately during this high-speed environment. The most famous doubled die obverse in U.S. coinage history was born not because of sabotage, not because of carelessness, but because of the complex hubbing process used at the time, which required multiple impressions to fully transfer the design onto a working die. When one of these impressions was misaligned and then impressed again, the result was dramatic doubling, especially visible on the date 1955 and the inscriptions "Liberty and in God We Trust." This doubling was not subtle, it was bold, strong, and unmistakable, creating a ghost-like shadow that could be seen without magnification. Unlike many errors that are discovered decades later, the 1955 double die cents entered circulation almost immediately and were noticed by the public within weeks. Stories spread of strange pennies with doubled numbers appearing in cigarette packs, vending machines, and cash registers. Many were traced to cigarette vending machines in the northeastern United States, because penny change was commonly returned in those machines, and young people began pulling them out, noticing something was wrong. Yet fascinating, the Mint quickly realized the error. But by then, an estimated 20 to 25,000 pieces had already escaped into circulation. The Mint chose not to recall them, partly because cents were low value, partly because recalling coins would cause panic and cost more than the coins themselves, and partly because the error did not affect the coin's ability to function as money. So the 1955 double die wheat penny quietly entered legend. Collectors began hoarding them. Newspapers wrote short pieces about strange pennies, and the numismatic community recognized that something extraordinary had happened. Over time, as wheat cents were replaced by the Lincoln Memorial Reverse in 1959, the 1955 double die stood out even more, becoming the crown jewel of error coin collecting and a rite of passage. For serious collectors, the value of the coin climbed steadily through the decades, fueled by its bold appearance, limited supply, and the romance of its accidental creation. Today, even heavily worn examples can be worth hundreds of dollars, while sharp uncirculated pieces can reach tens of thousands at auction, depending on color and condition, with red examples being the most valuable. The coin has also been widely counterfeited and altered, with common 1955 cents mechanically doubled or engraved to fool buyers, which adds another layer of intrigue and caution to its story. Genuine examples show clear notch doubling and strong separation that cannot be replicated easily, making authentication a critical part of the modern market. Beyond the famous double die, the 1955 wheat penny also represents the end of an era. It was struck in Philadelphia, Denver, and San Francisco, though only the Philadelphia issue carries the famous doubling. All 1955 wheat cents were composed of 95% copper and 5% tin and zinc composition. That would soon change in later decades as metal prices rose and the mint adapted to economic pressures. These coins circulated during a time when a penny could still buy something meaningful, when children collected coins from soda machines, and when the smallest denomination still mattered in daily life. The 1955 wheat penny captures that moment perfectly, linking everyday America with a once-in-a-lifetime mistake that could never be repeated today with modern single-squeeze hubbing technology. Such dramatic double dies are virtually impossible, making the 1955 double die a relic of a vanished minting process and a symbol of how imperfections can create greatness. This coin teaches that history is not always planned. Sometimes it slips through unnoticed rings in a cash drawer and waits for someone curious enough to look closely and realize they are holding something special, something that connects industry, art, economics, and chance in one small copper disc. And that is why the 1955 Lincoln wheat penny is not just a coin, but a legend that continues to inspire collectors, storytellers, and dreamers who hope that maybe, just maybe, an extraordinary piece of history could still be hiding in plain sight in their own hands. Imagine holding a small copper coin that passed through the hands of factory workers, soldiers, shopkeepers, and families just after the most powerful war the world had ever seen. This is not just a penny, this is the 1946 wheat penny 1-cent coin, a silent witness to the moment when America stepped out of war and into a brand new future. And if you think a single cent cannot tell a massive story, then stay with me, because this coin carries the sound of victory, the weight of sacrifice, and the hope of a nation rebuilding itself brick by brick, job by job, and dream by dream. The 1946 wheat penny was born in a world forever changed. World War II had just ended. Millions of soldiers were returning home. Factories that once built tanks and airplanes were now turning back to cars, refrigerators, and everyday goods, and the American economy was shifting from survival to growth. The wheat penny design, created by Victor David Brenner decades earlier, was still in circulation, showing Abraham Lincoln on the front, a symbol of unity, leadership, and endurance, and on the back the two wheat stalks framing the words 1 cent, a design that represented America as an agricultural, industrial, and moral powerhouse. In 1946, copper itself carried deep meaning. During the war, copper had been rationed and redirected to ammunition, wiring, and military equipment. So when the war ended, the return to normal coin production symbolized peace, stability, and continuity. The 1946 wheat penny was struck in massive numbers at the Philadelphia, Denver, and San Francisco mints because the nation needed coinage to fuel everyday commerce. People were spending again, businesses were opening again, and money was moving fast through a rapidly awakening economy. Every one of these pennies jingling in pockets and cash drawers told the story of normal life returning to America. Soldiers used them to buy coffee, mothers used them at grocery counters, kids used them for candy and comics, and collectors decades later would hold them, wondering about the hands that once spent them. The Philadelphia Mint struck the majority of 1946 wheat pennies With no mint mark producing hundreds of millions of coins, Denver added a demint mark below the date, creating a slightly scarcer but still widely circulated issue, while San Francisco struck fewer coins marked with an S, making those examples more desirable today. Especially in higher condition, the condition of a 1946 wheat penny matters greatly because most were heavily used, circulated, worn, and passed along without thought. Pennies were everyday money, not treasures, yet hidden among the worn brown copper surfaces are coins with sharp details, blazing red color, and near perfect strikes, and those are the pieces collectors hunt today. A fully red, uncirculated 1946 wheat penny can be worth many times more than face value, not because of rarity alone, but because of survival. The survival of original mint color after decades of handling is rare, and that rarity drives value. Errors also play a major role in the legend of the 1946 wheat penny. Off-center strikes, die cracks, double dies, and other mint mistakes transform an ordinary cent into a collectible prize. These errors remind us that even in massive industrial operations, humans and machines were not perfect, and each mistake created a one-of-a-kind historical artifact. The wheat penny era itself was nearing its end, though no one knew it yet. Just 12 years later, in 1958, the wheat design would be retired, replaced by the Lincoln Memorial reverse, making every wheat penny, including the 1946 issue, part of a closed chapter in American coinage history, a chapter that spanned to world wars, the Great Depression, and the rise of the United States as a global superpower. When you study a 1946 wheat penny, you are not just studying metal, you are studying post-war optimism, returning soldiers, starting families, the baby boom, suburban expansion, and the foundation of modern America. This coin circulated during the early days of the Cold War, when hope and fear coexisted, when America was proud, confident, and cautious all at the same time. It is a small artifact with a massive story, a story of recovery, resilience, and renewal, and that is why the 1946 wheat penny still matters today, why collectors search rolls, why historians reference it, and why a simple 1-cent coin can still command attention, curiosity, and respect. So the next time you see a worn brown penny from 1946, remember it once lived in a world rebuilding itself, and in its quiet copper way it helped carry America forward into a new era. As we go deeper into the story of the 1946 wheat penny, we begin to understand how deeply connected this coin is to everyday American life. In the immediate post-war years, inflation was beginning to rise, wages were adjusting, and the average American family was learning how to live in a world without ration books. Again, pennies mattered because every cent mattered. People counted change carefully, and the wheat penny was part of nearly every transaction, from streetcar fares to corner store purchases. The sound of copper pennies sliding across wooden counters became the sound of recovery and confidence returning to the nation. The Lincoln portrait on the obverse carried extra meaning. In 1946, Lincoln represented unity after division, strength after struggle, and moral leadership during uncertain times. His image reminded Americans of sacrifice and perseverance, values they had just lived through on a global scale. The engraving style itself, simple, strong, and timeless, reinforced the seriousness of the era. This was not flashy money. This was honest working money made to serve a rebuilding nation. The reverse wheat ears symbolized abundance and growth, something Americans desperately wanted after years of scarcity. Wheat was food security, prosperity, and stability. And even though the country was becoming more industrial, the wheat design still honored the agricultural roots that fed the nation through war and peace. Metallurgy also plays a role in the fascination of the 1946 wheat penny, made primarily of copper, with small amounts of tin and zinc. The coin has aged differently depending on storage and environment. Some toned deep chocolate brown, others developed warm golden hues, and a lucky few retained bright red mint luster. Collectors today classify these colors carefully because color directly impacts value. A red-brown coin tells one story, while a fully red coin tells another story of preservation and chance, storage away from moisture, heat, and handling. Mint state examples are especially prized because they show how the coin looked when it first left the presses in 1946. Sharp wheat lines, crisp lettering, and strong Lincoln details. These coins feel like time capsules frozen in the moment of America's post-war rebirth. The Denver and San Francisco issues add another layer of narrative. Denver pennies often show strong strikes reflecting improvements in minting technology, while San Francisco coins sometimes display weaker strikes, making high-grade examples more challenging. To find this variation gives collectors endless reasons to study, compare, and search rolls, hoping to uncover a survivor that escaped decades of circulation-era coins from 1946. Deepen the mystery even further. Imagine a die crack forming during long production runs, or a misaligned blanket slipping into place. Each error created under pressure and speed tells us how hard the mints were working to meet national demand. Doubled dies especially fascinate collectors because they show subtle shifts during die creation and require careful examination. Under magnification, finding one is like discovering a hidden message from the mint floor, a quiet whisper from 1946 that not everything went exactly as planned. The 1946 wheat penny also circulated alongside major cultural changes. Radios dominated entertainment. Television was just beginning to appear. Automobiles filled highways and suburban neighborhoods expanded rapidly. Children born during the baby boom would later grow up spending these very pennies on school lunches and movie tickets, unknowingly carrying history in their pockets. When the wheat penny design ended in 1958, many of these coins were still circulating, worn thin but reliable. And when they were finally pulled from circulation, they became souvenirs of a different America, an America that counted pennies, valued thrift, and respected hard-earned money. Today, the 1946 wheat penny stands as a bridge between eras, between wartime sacrifice and peacetime prosperity, between old traditions and modern America. Collectors treasure it not because it is rare in raw numbers, but because it is rich in meaning. Every scratch, every worn edge is proof that this coin lived, worked, and traveled through a defining chapter of American history. And as long as people continue to search coin jars, estate collections, and old rolls, the story of the 1946 wheat penny will